Welcome to the Limitless Ladies in Leadership podcast. I am your host, Danielle, and I've created a space for the many powerful, creative, and limitless female leaders to share their stories. From female CEOs to professional athletes and doctors, every powerful woman has a story to tell. There's no guarantee where this podcast will take us, so welcome to the unfiltered, unedited, and badass space for all women to align. On the phone with me today is Sheree Trask. Sheree is a seasoned ghostwriter with work published with Hay House Inc., an author, a mentor, empowerment speaker, content creator, and contributor to the One Habit book series. She helps thought leaders and mission-driven brands give their vision a voice to build authority so that they can scale and serve. She has spent 20 plus years studying the mind-body connection and speaks internationally on the importance of using mindset to move through trauma and give pain a purpose. Sheree is on a mission to help transform the hearts and minds of humanity so that together we can raise the collective consciousness of our world and truly be free to live unapologetically out loud. Sheree, it's so good to connect with you again. I can't wait to get started.
Yay, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yay! Okay, so a little background on Sheree and I. Once upon a time, I used to manage a podcast studio, and Sheree hosted a podcast called Soul Fucked, which I had the pleasure to produce. So Sheree, you've been doing this damn thing for quite some time, but I actually don't know a whole lot about how everything got started for you. So let's start from the beginning. What was childhood? Was there these like huge dreams of being an entrepreneur and lifting people up, or is that something that developed over time?
Yeah, so it's funny. We all have a story, right? And where we start usually is not where we end. And for me, it really was a matter of, I grew up in an environment with really strong women. I was raised by a single mom who was young. She was 21 when she found out she was pregnant. My biological father was an addict, and so I actually never met him. And the moment that my mom found out I was pregnant, she was like, what am I doing? Right? Like, why am I with this person? I love him, but they didn't have anything in common when it came to him being an addict and her never doing any of it. Yeah. And so I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house growing up. And through that process, my grandma was very, very, very spiritual and practiced a lot of the Buddhist philosophy. And anytime I would complain about anything as kids do, she would always say, okay, so what was it for? So the book that I'm writing right now is actually called Find the Four. And it is all about moving through sexual trauma, which we'll get to, but moving through sexual trauma and finding the blessing in everything. So with all of that, you know, I was raised with the belief that if you have a dream, then it's possible. And you are literally, as your podcast says, limitless. And we can have anything that we choose. Through a series of a lot of, I'll just say, trials and tribulations, there was a lot of reasons why I could have doubted that to be true. It was from a very young age, obviously starting with my biological father. There was a lot of abandonment from men. There was a lot of sexual harassment. Even one of the memories that I always remember is being in fourth grade, really wanting to play the violin and like so deeply wanting to play the violin. I have no idea why. Finally got my mom to get me a violin, and it was the beginning of music class, and the music teacher shut me in the closet, sat me on his lap, started caressing my cheeks and telling me how beautiful I was and that my cheeks matched my shirt. And here I am 10 years old, right? And I even knew that was wrong then. And I remember running to the principal's office and saying like what had happened. I don't know that anything happened to him again, but I never played the violin again. And that was like a series of things that continued to happen in my life. It's like any time that I would, my first job here in San Diego, where I live now, I grew up in Seattle, but first job was sexually harassed by the boss. Told the owner didn't do anything, so I quit. Worked in real estate, was sexually harassed by the VP. Told the owner, nothing happened. I left. Like it was just this constant thing going over and over. And I was like, number one, I'm not supposed to fucking work for anybody. Like I just can't, like I can't be an employee. I can't like do anything. I have to pave my own way. And there's a reason all of these things continue to happen. And when I was 19, I was sexually assaulted. And that really was a big pivotal moment for me that said, you are supposed to do something with all of this. And I listened and I continued to just lean into it as much as it felt difficult or challenging or like I couldn't possibly make something from this, I continue to lean in and say, yes, I can. What is it? What is my purpose here? What am I supposed to do? And like any entrepreneur, right? Like you fall on your face a million times, but it's not about the falling. It's about what you do when you get back up.
Absolutely.
And figuring it out. So in a nutshell, that's kind of, wrapped up the backstory of how I got to this place now. And it's been such a wild ride and a blessing. And I'm super grateful for all of it. And people ask all the time, like, don't you wish that these things wouldn't have happened? And it's like, no, because how would I have gotten to this place? I would have been somewhere, but it wouldn't have been here. Mm-hmm. And here is pretty good. So
Yeah. And we're definitely going to dive into some more of that. Are you comfortable with talking about the sexual assault case when you were 19?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. So I was actually working at a salon, and there was a gentleman who continued to come in. Excuse me. He was a bit older than me, and he was annoying. Like, he drove me crazy. He was one of those guys that just was constantly asking me out, was super flirtatious. And I just was disgusted by him. Like, you are pathetic. Mm-hmm. So finally, against my own judgment, I said, you know what, if I say yes, will you stop asking me out? And this was over months and months and months of him asking. He's like, yes. So I ended up going out with him. And the first time I went out with him, it was just like his friends were all out having a drink. I met them. I didn't have a drink. I was only 19 at the time. And it was very short and brief. And then he's like, okay, so it wasn't that bad, right? Will you go to a movie with me next week? And I was like, I mean, it wasn't terrible. Sure, whatever. So I ended up meeting him at his house before the movie because he said he wanted to make sure that I was warm. So I needed to get a jacket from his house because I didn't bring one. As soon as I walked in the door, I was standing in the living room. He went back in his bedroom and he called my name and asked me to come back and get a jacket. And I said, no, you can just pick one for me. I don't really care. And he's like, no, come back here. As soon as I walked into his bedroom, he grabbed me, threw me on the bed, ripped my shirt open, pulled my pants down, and proceeded to rape me. And I was crying, I was screaming, I was begging for him to stop. And then I just felt myself go numb. Yeah. And I remember in that moment, I was just like, this is not happening. This is not happening. Right? Like, I'm the one who has shit together. I'm the one who people look to for guidance. Like, I can't be broken. I can't be damaged. Like, all these labels that so many survivors tend to give themselves in the moment. And I remember, he kept saying, oh, come on, baby, you're going to like it. You're going to like it. And all I could think was like, what the fuck? Yeah. And I'm a small person, and he was over 200 pounds.
Oh, boy.
And it was one of those things, like, there was nothing literally physically that I could do. I couldn't fix it. So when it was over, he got up, he pulled up his pants. He's like, see, baby, I told you you'd like it. And he walked out.
Oh my God.
And I just kind of slid down onto the floor and sat there. I crawled into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I was looking at my reflection. And all I could think was like, who is this person? I don't know who this is now. Like, and that's one of the things that I talk about, because I speak publicly about sexual assault and all the things. And it's like, we forget as survivors that it's so important for us to be able to give ourselves a space to grieve our old self in order to step into the next version, because that person's no longer. And although it wasn't our choice, it also can be a really beautiful story to rewrite. Yeah. And so walking out of that house, I didn't say a word to him. I just walked out. I sat in my car. It was a rainy October night, October 15th, 2000. And I just sobbed and I was praying to forgive this man so that I could be free. It had nothing to do with him. It was just like, I can't carry this. I can't carry this. Wow. And I didn't leave that parking spot until I had forgiven him that night. And the real work began. Like, for me, I stayed silent for 4 years. And so my work was forgiving myself for how many other people have had to go through this because I didn't speak up. And it was 3 weeks later that I ended up going to urgent care because I had a terrible stomach ache and I was hurled over in pain. They ran a bunch of tests and came back and the doctor's like, oh, you're pregnant. So that was another layer to the entire experience where, again, I was staying silent. I wasn't telling anybody what was going on. So here I am, 19, I had just been raped and now I'm pregnant, and found out that it was ectopic, meaning it was in my fallopian tube. So for 4 months, I went through chemotherapy injections to allow it to pass safely through my fallopian tubes in hopes that if I chose to have kids in the future, everything would be okay. And all of these things. And meanwhile, I'm going through it all by myself.
Right.
I ended up calling my mom, and her and I are super close. And I was just like, Mom, so I had sex and I got pregnant. Like, I didn't tell her what happened, like nothing. And so it took 4 years for me to finally say something. And it was a moment where I was on a date with somebody else, actually. And 4 years later, we're sitting in my living room having a glass of wine. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was no context to it at all. I just blurted out. I was like, I was raped. And there was just this silence, but it's like I couldn't hold it in anymore. I knew that I had to say something because it was manifesting in physical symptoms for me at that point.
Yeah.
And I ended up spending, 9 years of my 20s in the hospital. Literally, I was in the hospital. I had to have people shower for me, cook for me, clean for me, shop for me. I couldn't get out of bed half the time. I needed help with that as well. And I had just gotten so sick. My body had turned on me. And it's something, again, that I speak about so openly when I'm speaking to women's groups and stuff, is our secrets keep us sick. Yeah. And we have the power to heal ourselves. And it starts with us being brave enough to use our voice and whatever that looks like. And so many people think like, oh, well, I had a traumatic experience, but it wasn't like as bad as yours or something like that. And that's the thing about trauma. It's like, there's no good or bad trauma. There's no better or worse trauma. Trauma is trauma, and it's all how the person handles it and what you choose to do with it. We could have the same type of experience. We could have both been assaulted and both have chosen a completely different path, right? It doesn't make one of us better or worse, but we do have a choice. And that's the power that I always try to instill in survivors, is like, yes, this happened. But like my grandma used to say, find the for. Like, what was it for? You are not a victim. If you want to be a victim, you can be, right? But like, does it feel better for you to be a victim, or does it feel better for you to be a survivor? And that is entirely up to the person, which is so powerful. And that for me was really a point where I was able to take my power back when I said, you know what, number one, this wasn't about him, or this wasn't about me at all. This was about him and his own demons. So like, you go do you, I'm going to focus on what I need to do to heal. And it took time, of course, right? But it's also been like the greatest gift of my life. And I will say that probably until the day I die, is that I wouldn't have taken it back to the world, because it really showed me what I was capable of, what was really important to me. And it taught me to be more courageous, which now helps me help my clients that much more.
Yeah. And so I have a question with all this, because I have some stories that relate to yours as well regarding sexual trauma. And I think we tend to go one of two ways after sexual trauma. Either we end up acting out sexually and sleeping with a bunch of people, which was my story, or we become so closed up that we can't be romantic with anyone, or we don't feel that we can, which is also part of my story. But after this incident with you, what changed? How were you acting?
Yeah. So, it's so interesting. And I feel like I'm a bit of an anomaly in this, in that when it happened, and I think part of this was, again, like, because of the way that I was raised, and because I made the decision in the moment to like let the pain of him go, and I stepped into my own self at that moment, I think that really changed a lot of things for me. I didn't act out sexually either way. That didn't affect me at all. There were certain things, like, even to this day, like, don't touch my neck. Just don't touch my neck, because like that too. His hands were around my neck, right? Like that, I don't like it. It's a trigger. But for me, it was more so that I was like hiding behind accolades at that point. Like, I still graduated college on the dean's list. I went back to school and I studied holistic health in order to heal my own body. I was going to yoga teacher training. Like, I was doing all of these things to say, like, see, I can still be normal. I can still be normal. Nothing's wrong with me. Meanwhile, my body was like disintegrating, and I was dying. My body was, I was killing myself. Right. And I'll never forget, like, one of the times I'd gotten really sick and doctors never knew what was going on. They just could not figure it out. They're like, there's something happening, but we don't know why. Like, you look healthy, you have a healthy lifestyle. What's going on? And because, again, I hadn't told anybody, trauma is stored in the body. Mm-hmm. And when trauma is stored in the body, it creates inflammation, it creates disease, it creates all of these things that, again, manifest physically. And I had been, I'm trying to think like how it happened. It doesn't really matter. But anyways, I was at home. I decided that I wasn't going to go to the doctor. I didn't feel well, but whatever. I just got used to not feeling well. My temperature got up to 105 and wow. I was delirious. And I called a coworker and I was like, I need to go to the hospital. Like, I feel like I'm having an out of body experience. I don't know what to do. I can't drive myself. Can you please take me? And he lived next to me. So he came, picked me up, took me to the hospital. I ended up being in the hospital for nearly 2 weeks. And I had wow. a severe kidney infection to the point where the doctors called my mom in Seattle and was like, we don't think she's going to make it. We're going to need you to come. And wow. me being, my mom's only child, she was like, what? So of course she was on the next plane. But that was really a turning point for me where I was like, what am I doing? Yeah. Like, I'm doing everything that I know to do, but what am I not doing is, I guess, the better question. Like, what do I need to be doing in order for this to stop? And it's still those moments, I'm 40 now, and it's still those moments where when something's off, I turn around and I ask the question, like, what do you get to be better at? And it usually for me comes back to like self-care and mm-hmm. self-love and really like saying you don't have to be going all the time, because through that process of healing, I had gotten so good at distracting by doing. Yeah. And I forgot like the gift of being and just being like, it's okay to relax. It's okay not to do anything. It's okay not to, be the best at all the things, right? Like, it's so silly, but we do that as humans, regardless of trauma. Like, we have this thing where we want to be perfect in certain areas. And I think that's especially true for women in mm-hmm. my experience, because I primarily work with women as well. And I don't see it as much in men. And it's a really fascinating duality for me, because when I ask men about it and then I ask women about it, it's such a different answer when it comes to like the upbringing of how they were raised to be a certain way. Where men, it's like they were encouraged to just fail, but like get back up and keep going. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about it. We don't share emotions. We don't do whatever. And then women, it's like we cry, we sit with it, whatever. But then we're also trying to, in a way, be more of the masculine to mm-hmm. prove that we can do all of the things too, right? So it's like we have a lot of weight on our shoulders when it comes to that. And I think that I started that really, really young because of what I had gone through.
Yeah. And oh my God, so many things have come up during this. So congrats first on that immediate forgiveness, because even in my, 30s now, it's not an easy task, especially something that traumatic. So congrats to you for having the courage and just the strength to be able to do that and kind of let go of that first level, at least first layer.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then holy shit, 40, you don't look 40 at all. I knew we were about the same age, but man, you look like you're 29,
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. It must be all this like healthy stuff you're doing, and then also like the distracting by doing is something that you mentioned. And I can relate to that so much that even, my story includes a lot of drug and alcohol abuse. And even when that, I wouldn't say before, but just kind of, there were phases that I would go through. And for me, it was like busy, 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 busy. And then there was like a session of like drugs or alcohol to try to numb things. And then it was like, oh, well, I'm going to compete in this race and I'm going to do this snowboarding event and I'm going to do this, like all these things because distraction. And inherently competing in a race or snowboarding or whatever are not bad. They're great things. But when you're using those things as tools to distract you from what you're feeling over time, mm-hmm. that can cause issues. And for me, this like total detachment of self, of like just really not sitting with the feelings and really getting through some of those things and being like, yes, that shit happened to me, but that's fine because I'm still here. And as long as I'm alive, I can still be doing something bigger.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's choice, right? Yeah. That is where you come in and you harness your own power. And I think a lot of people, and this is not a judgment, it just is based on my experience and speaking to so many women who've gone through things like this, is because our power was taken in that moment, oftentimes we label ourselves as powerless moving forward, right? And then there's other people like you and like I took my power back in a different way than you did, right? Like you took your power back in a way to survive. It was, I'm going to do this because I don't want to feel anything. So it was a numbing for you.
Yeah.
For me, I went all into the feeling. And there's so many reasons why that probably happened. It's what I knew to do. I was encouraged to feel growing up. So it's fascinating to me because really there is so much power that we hold that when we take a moment to step back and say, fuck what everyone else wants us to do, fuck what everyone else wants us to think. And we say, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? What do I need? We have this notion that it's selfish to think of ourselves first. And you know what? It is. And that's really fucking cool. Being selfish is not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you make it to be a bad thing. But when it's coming from a place of I'm trying to be my best because I know that I have more to do in this world and I can't do those things if I don't feel amazing and I am not healing and I'm not feeling all of these emotions that are coming up because of the experiences that I've had, we are doing such a disservice to everybody around us.
It's like the whole analogy.
We are shrinking.
Yeah. And it's like the whole analogy of putting your own, air mask on the airplane first. It's like, I'm not trying to save me first, but if I don't make sure that I'm okay, I can't put your mask on for you. So, taking care of yourself. And that's something that I'm learning so much myself too, because I was brought up in that environment of like, that's selfish. Selfish is wrong. That means you don't care about others. That's toxic, whatever. And it's like, no, there's a difference. Like what you were saying, if I'm not inherently trying to hurt others or stomp on others in order to gain my own, whatever, then what the fuck is the problem with me, focusing on myself first so that I have more to offer you?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yep.
So,
and I think one of the things, like you had mentioned, distraction. And I think that that's something I had actually just written about recently is it's like, I think we are all walking around craving connection, yet we are using distractions like social media, or for some people, sex, drugs, whatever it is, right? To gain this like false sense of connection. Meanwhile, we're detaching from ourselves and detaching from our truth. And now we're more disconnected than we've ever been when the goal is actually connection.
That's so powerful.
And we're covering it in distractions, right? It's crazy. But when you think about it, and I think that COVID, this whole thing has been a really beautiful, eye-opening experience, at least for me, to say like, what am I distracting from? What am I choosing not to connect, or who am I choosing not to connect with? Usually it's ourselves, right? It's like, it's saying like, oh, if I don't do this, then I don't have to face the reality of how I feel or what's going on or blah, blah, blah. But really, like, those distractions are the things that are keeping us sick, sad, and small. And we get to choose differently.
Okay, so let's go from there. So if we're choosing differently and we're saying, you know what, these distractions aren't necessarily benefiting me anymore. Maybe they served a purpose in the beginning, but I'm ready. I'm ready to move forward and like really face whatever it is that I'm trying to face and like be my authentic self, be here 100%. How do we begin to start feeling again, to start being present again when we've taught ourselves for so long how to shut those out?
So this is like one of my favorite things because it's so uncomfortable, which I love. But I really think that starts with silence. And we like noise, noise as distraction, right? Like we are a society that is so engulfed in all of the noise from every avenue. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. So the moment that we can allow ourselves, it's almost like granting ourselves permission to be still and to be instead of do, right?
Yes.
So taking the pause, which is my favorite thing, and I used to be so terrible at it, is being able to say like, you know what? I just need an hour to myself right now, and doing nothing, right? Like I'm going to lay on my couch and maybe I'll do some breath work or I'll listen to a meditation. But sometimes it's like just really being still and feeling into my body. So the stillness, again, like so much power in stillness, and being able to say like, okay, I'm feeling like if I close my eyes right now, I could tell you I'm feeling tightness in my neck. I woke up with a little bit of a headache. So I'm feeling tightness there. I feel open in my throat because I'm getting to be expressive with you today. Like really tuning into the places in your body that you're feeling whatever's going on. And then once you say like, okay, I'm feeling it here, holding that space. So let's say you're feeling a tightness in your throat, which is something that I have experienced a lot. And usually when I'm feeling any sort of stress or anything, it's usually in my throat, which is why I teach voice and speaking and all of those things, because I know that that's what I'm here to do because it's my own lesson as well. Yeah. And so when my throat's tight, it's like putting my hand on my throat and doing my own like internal dialogue, like you're safe to speak, you're safe to be seen, you're safe to be heard, you are worthy, you are enough. Doing these things. And so many people, I think, shame themselves for, it's so interesting, they shame themselves for like positive self-talk.
Yes.
As if we should be talking shit to ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's always the question, like, would you say that to your best friend? Would you say that to somebody that you love? You would never speak that way. And if you did, you're kind of a dick, right? So like, I look at it from the perspective, like how would you speak to other people? And coming from like a really loving place, right? Like there's something to be said about, of course, being honest and being direct. Yes, please. And coming from a place of love. It's always the come from. So the silence and being able to tap in, tune in, and ask yourself the questions. And when things come up, like, you know, I'm feeling really, let's say, I'm feeling really sad today. Okay. Instead of judging like that sadness, where is this sadness coming from? Where do I feel it in my body? You know, did something happen? Was something said? Is there something that I need to clear? Sometimes it's like, what I find is so many people tend to, resentment's a big one, like hold resentment for unmet expectations based on unclarified expectations in the first place, right? Like you can't meet the expectations that you haven't allowed yourself to articulate to somebody. And so often I see this a lot in partnership, right? It's like you get mad at your partner because they didn't do X, Y, Z. And then when you really get honest with yourself and ask yourself, did you tell them that was important? Did you ask them? And so many people are like, well, they should just know. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that we were also mind readers. That's fucking crazy. Like, I can't expect my partner to do something if I haven't articulated that. So it's the same for yourself. Like when you get quiet and you allow yourself to be in that space of silence, like, what do I need? What do I want? And then honoring it, right? Because the unmet expectation can also be of self. Yeah. And that's something that we get to shift.
Yeah. And I love just going back to the negative self-talk, even on like a physical aspect, that there's so many times, you know, you and I are both on these fitness journeys. We've both been pretty fit for most of our lives. And, you know, I know that, you know, I can notice a little bit of extra fat here and there or whatever. And I look in the mirror and it's like the instant thought for me so many times is, oh my God, gross, or like something negative. Like, where did this come from? Oh my God. And until recently was no backup of like, you know what though, you're trying really freaking hard, give yourself a break. Or you know what though, you're beautiful anyway. Or just having these sort of like positive affirmations that are like, we're not going to be on our A game every single day. We get to look like shit once in a while, but that is the moment that we get to start working harder. Okay, so why do I look like shit today? Oh, because I ate 12 freaking vegan cookies yesterday. Yeah, that's probably why, you know.
Delicious.
Right.
Hashtag worth it.
As long as you don't beat yourself up, yes.
Well, that's the thing, right? There's even studies that show that the more negative self-talk, the more negative outcome, even on a physical place, right? So if you're having like a cookie and the whole time you're eating it, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm eating this cookie. Your body is more likely to hold fat. So enjoy the fucking cookie.
Yeah.
Like, move on. Like, there's no point. It's so funny to me.
Yeah. You know, one of the biggest things we'd kind of mentioned in the beginning of this too, is you being a huge proponent of lifting other women up and creating space for everyone to grow, really. And I know, like, as a competitive athlete and as a female myself, I can find myself often wanting to compete with other females. Like, oh, my body's not as good as hers. I don't have as much money as her. I don't have the whatever. And then instead of looking to them for inspiration, looking for ways that I can be better. Like, I'm going to stomp on them so that I can get that first place, right? So have you always had this supportive style mindset, or is this something that you've learned to develop over time?
For me, it just has always been. And again, I think that's just because I was raised that way. I was raised with strong women who were always lifting each other up, and were always encouraging and inspiring and empowering. And there was never an ounce of like, you're not good enough or you should do this differently at all. And I was a very strong-willed kid into adulthood, right? Still am.
Same.
But very vocal. And as such, I think my mom learned very early on, because my mom definitely is a little more passive than me.
Yeah, me too.
So so my mom learned early on, like, Sheree just gets to be what Sheree wants to be, and she gets not do what she wants to do in the sense of like, I'm going to raise hell. But at the same time, like, being able to say, okay, I see how other people do things. And my mom would have my grandmother too, would have the open conversations with me, like asking the questions if we saw something that maybe they didn't agree with. Instead of saying like, you shouldn't do it that way, they would say, what did you think about that?
Ooh,
and they would offer, like, for me to start thinking about like, well, I didn't really like how they talked to her because it felt mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, as a kid, you're using that language, like that felt mean. And the question would always be like, why was that mean? And then I would get to answer. And so it would open me up to like how I wanted to be as a human. And I think it just became so natural for me. I even remember like in high school, I had a great upbringing and I had a great like experience in school. And I was lucky that I wasn't bullied or anything like that. But I always remember that there was a couple of girls that were a year older than me, and they were just kind of mean girls. You know, there's the mean group. And I would always be nice, because why not? And I'll never forget, like, I had tried out for cheerleading, and when you make the squad, they come and they pick you up in the middle of the night and they do the whole initiation thing. The girls that picked me up were those girls.
Oh my God.
And I was like, fuck, man, what? I have to get them. So as soon as we got in their car, they're like, we're so excited. Da, da, da. And they're like, why are you so quiet? I'm like, I just have to be honest with you. I really just thought you guys hated me because you've always been so mean. And they're like, oh my God, no, we love you. We were just being mean because, you know, we're older and whatever. And they have this whole thing. And I remember even then thinking, who are your parents? like, how were you raised? Because it's so foreign to how I would act, right? And I think we see that in adulthood too, is when you talk about like this competition and feeling like you have to compare yourself to another woman or anything like that. When I look at other women that have something that feels exciting to me, whether it's like, oh my God, that she's rocking, she has got a rocking body, or look at her like slaying her business. Good for that girl. Yeah. To me, and I always say this too, like, we can only see that in which we possess. Ooh. So if I see that in somebody else, it means I'm also capable, or I wouldn't be able to see it. So when I see that, I'm like, fuck, I might have work to do, but I look good. Well,
I love that you brought that up too, because that's definitely been like a major shift for me where, you know, I would remember, like, let's go back to my 20s and, you know, with a boyfriend, and there'd be this girl, this banging girl walking down the beach, and she's got this teeny little bikini and amazing boobs and everything's just perfect. And I'm just like, oh, I hope he doesn't see her, you know, because I'm feeling kind of small right now. But then it's like, now it's so funny because I'm the exact opposite. I'm like, hey, look at that girl over there. She's fucking hot, you know, like she must put a lot of work in there. And it's just kind of this whole, like, I'm not going to be the hottest, the best, the fucking, the smartest, whatever these kind of words are 100% of the time. And that doesn't mean I need to trash someone else. I can use them as motivation to get further. Or if I don't want that, just accept it and be like, yeah, she's doing cool, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's one of the biggest steps in growth, is being able to look at the people around us. And instead of looking at the things that we may see as lack in ourselves, looking at them from a place of like, good for fucking you. Like the chicks with the banging bodies, like you talk about, right? Like, that's discipline, girl. I'm super stoked for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would love to have that kind of discipline when I came to that, but I also like cookies. So like, right. So there's like this balance that we get to decide what's going to be important to us. And it's not about comparing ourselves to others. It's about loving what we see in others and then taking those things and saying like, does that inspire me to be better in that way? And if so, like, thank you for being amazing and giving me inspiration. Now I get to go do something with that.
Yeah. I love that. Now, you had mentioned earlier having the rebellious spirit, and I, like I said, can completely agree with that. And in some ways, it can be really positive, but I've occasionally, or maybe even more so, found myself in predicaments in relationships or at work or, whatever the situation is. So how do you manage this sort of rebellion and use it in a positive way?
Well, I think I learned early on how to be, what's the right word? I think I learned early on how to just use it positively, because I would see when I would do certain things that it wouldn't create a positive outcome. And so that was not the right way to do it.
Okay.
Right. It's one of those things like, ask for permission later.
Right.
Or ask for forgiveness later. Yeah, right. I don't ask for permission because I don't need it. I'll ask for forgiveness, but like, I'm going to do what I want to do. So I think it's, in that case, it's really about like asking yourself the question before you act. So often we react. So asking your question before we act of, what is the outcome that I want to get from this? Right. Because I used to be one of those people that, if I didn't agree with you, I would just jump in and be like, no. Let's talk about that. This is what I think. And this is why I think you're wrong. Like, I had this whole thing, and now I can listen objectively and be like, okay, I actually don't agree with that. Totally fine. I'm not judging it. I don't agree with it. And then being able to allow myself permission to confidently vocalize whatever needs to be said, but I'm not somebody who's reactive necessarily.
That's good.
So if something's happening that I don't like, I feel it again, like I'm just a feeler, but I feel it in my body and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. This doesn't feel good. And then I get to tune in and ask myself the questions like, why? Before I allow my rebellious spirit to take over and just be like, Tasmanian devil all over the place, right? Because like, we all know that's not beneficial all the time. So I think too, when it comes to like, so many people try to stifle the rebellion. And I think that that's, again, a disservice, because there's a reason that we have the wild and carefree spirit that we do. And it's about harnessing the way that we express it in a way that creates an outcome that's positive.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like when you are somebody who tends to be like rebellious, and for me, I'm incredibly impulsive in many ways, right? So like, you just get to be okay with the fact that you may fall and fail a million different times. And I don't know if you're familiar at all with human design.
No.
But okay, so I just find it fascinating because in human design, I'm a splenic projector. 3, 6 are my numbers. And so like your 3 is the number, or your first number is the number that says like, this is who you are day to day.
Okay. This
is layman's terms that I'm sharing right now. The second number is kind of who you become, and it's like the underlying you. So like the 3 in mine says, you are here to make mistakes. You are here to fall on your face and learn from your mistakes and show the world a different way. You're essentially a way shower. So when I started like diving into all of that, I'm like, oh, it's cool that I just fucking fail.
Yeah.
And I jump into things, right? Like, I'm doing it right. Yes, that's what I'm supposed to do. So I think also like taking those things and saying like, these are actually my gifts and my strengths. And it's okay that I do it this way. It doesn't make me wrong. So if your rebellious spirit is like begging to be set free, as I say so often, it's like, let the fucking girl out.
Yeah.
Let her play. Let her do what she needs to do. And pat her on the back when she does a job well done. And instead of like shaming the things that feel like quote unquote failures, saying, what can I learn from them?
Yeah.
Because the shame is not what's going to carry you forward. The shame is not what's going to inspire people. The shame is not what's going to allow you to grow. If anything, those things will keep you small, and they will keep you, questioning yourself, and they lower your confidence. Like none of that is supportive.
I love that, because one of the things I hear so much, I'm fairly tall for a female, and I have a very loud, carrying voice, and I'm pretty muscular, and I have kind of these more masculine physical traits on the outside, and I hear this so often, like, shh, or can you be quiet, or you're too much, you're a lot of energy, and I realized, I started creating this idea in my mind that my voice didn't matter, that my personality had to be different, that there was something wrong about me. And what I'm realizing now, that I'm just in the wrong group. Like I'm in the wrong industry at work, which is, like I told you earlier, I quit my job and I'm moving on to other things. I'm, maybe these are different times in the past. I'm in the wrong relationship. I have the wrong friends. I've, whatever. And I shouldn't call them wrong. They're just not suiting me. That it's like, use it. Where can these characteristics be used in a positive way? And that doesn't mean that it just gives me free, reign to just run around and be a crazy person. But like, how does this suit me? Because if it is inherently me, chances are it's going to come up again, right? So like, what supports me in this?
100%. And I think one of the things that is super powerful as well is to look at it from the perspective of like, always looking at it from gratitude. Like,
yes.
Okay, so I had this job, or I had this relationship, or I had these friendships, and I got into them for a reason, because in that moment, they supported the person I was then.
Yep.
I am no longer that person.
Yep.
So thank you for all of that experience. I can no longer stay here if I want to evolve into the greatest version of myself and continue to grow. So being able to say, thank you, I no longer need you.
Yes.
Goodbye. It's the same. I teach that too. It's the same with negative thinking. It's like, thank you, I no longer need you. Goodbye.
And
right? We don't need to keep it.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that, because I was thinking, as we were talking about the job topic, that like, I started getting to a point that was so uncomfortable. And I thankfully was able to recognize that I was somewhat acting out on that like I was not showing up as happy, bubbly Danielle like I normally do, that I, was maybe getting my tasks done at work, but didn't have the same enthusiasm that I did. And I took that as like, you know what? I've been thinking about quitting for a while. And at a certain point, maybe pretty soon, I'm about to not only cause a disservice to this company, but I may get fired for not living up to these standards. So I'm going to take the initiative and say, you know what, guys, like I am so grateful for my time here. And I've learned so much, and I truly have. And, like you said, moving on to something bigger after that. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything in our life serves a purpose. It's up to us to see like, what is that purpose, and how can I use it? Right. Instead of saying like, oh, that experience was terrible. Okay. It may not have been your favorite experience, but also could you just take that experience and say like, what were the things that were positive about it, and focus there? Because it's really easy to get set on the spiral of like, woe is me. Again, that victim mindset, right? It's like, you can be a victim, but something I always ask people when they talk about like quote unquote victimhood is, does it feel better for you to call yourself a victim, or does it feel better for you to call yourself a survivor?
Exactly.
Whatever feels better for you is where you get to go, and you get to create the story. So don't get stuck in this place of like, my job sucks, my relationship sucks, my friendship sucks. Fucking change it.
Yeah.
Stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Fucking change it.
Exactly. I love it, man. So I know you've been on this sort of like entrepreneur journey since 2003. So how did this start for you? And then how has it kind of transformed into what you're doing today?
Yeah. So I originally went to school and I studied fashion styling, and I thought I was going to work in TV and film. Got my degree in visual communications. I was like stoked. I wanted to be a stylist on set. Started my first company. I was doing fashion styling. And I realized like very soon, I was like, God, this is more of a hobby.
Yeah.
If I had to do this every day, I would kill myself. So like I let that company be kind of my like side hobby thing that I happened to make some money with for a few years. And then when I went back to school to study holistic health, is through my own healing journey, was really when I was finding like I've always been super passionate about health and fitness and well-being. And again, like was raised with this belief of like the Buddhist philosophy and like be good to one another and all the things. And so it was really about me tapping into what makes me happy, and what makes me happy is helping people.
Yeah.
And how can I best help people with my gifts? What are the things that make me unique? And it's those things like, what are the things that you can do that come so easy to you that you don't feel like work? And it I fell into it really. Like, I'd always had my own business, always, mainly because, again, like, I fucking hate rules and I don't want to be told what to do. Like, I can't do it. So when I really got into like more of the health and wellness and all of that stuff, I was doing coaching specifically around helping people heal autoimmune conditions using nutrition and mindset. Mindset was always the foundation. So from there, it kind of moved into, I was writing for Health and Fitness magazine. And I always had loved writing. And I had met somebody at the gym, and there was this obnoxious poster of me at the gym because I was doing contract work for nutrition support. Right. So this guy walks by and he's like, "Oh my God, that's you." And he points to the picture, points to me. I'm like, "Oh God. Hi, so nice to meet you." And he tells me about his startup and da-da-da-da. So that was the first book I ghost wrote. Is he asked if I would ghost write a book for him on autoimmune disease. And I didn't even skip a beat, Danielle. I was just like, sure. And in my mind, I was like, I'm going to fucking shit my pants. I've never written a book in my life. What do I do? How do I do this? And just to give you context, like, I charged him $1,500. Now to ghostwrite a book, it starts at $50,000. Like, the discrepancy is so bananas, right? So that kind of started my whole journey, and like going into like what I really love is helping people use their voice to tell their story and get more voices into the world with the writing component. Still, my whole niche is transformational nonfiction. So that's personal development, mindset, holistic health, spirituality. So I'm still encompassing all of those things. And then for years, I was doing script writing. I was doing set design. I was doing all of these things with this also same company where I was ghostwriting from founder. So I was taking both of my degrees and using them into what I was doing every day. And now it's just like, I'm so clear that what I'm doing is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And it's helping people tell their stories. It's giving a voice to the voiceless. It's really allowing courage to soar because people decide that they want to be brave. I want to be witnessed because I know that it will help somebody else. And it's not a matter of like ego, right? Because a lot of people, they'll decide that they want to write a book, and always I do this deep dive with them up front. And anytime that it's coming back to ego, like, well, I want people to see me, I want this. It's like, those are all beautiful things. And if you're writing this only for yourself, don't be disappointed when the outcome is not more people coming to you.
Yes.
Right? Because if we're talking at somebody, it's very hard to connect.
Yes.
It's a matter of like connecting through relatability in your experiences, sure. But like, how does this relate to the reader? And how does this solve the problem that they're having? And how does this directly correlate to the outcome that they want to achieve? So that's kind of where I've been for the last decade, is doing all of the writing and really helping people tell their stories. And it's the reason that I started when I first shared about my assault so many years ago now. I started speaking openly in women's groups immediately. And, I spoke in London in 2018. I was the headline speaker at a women's conference, and the amount of women that came up to me afterwards just to say, like, I've never shared my story before. Aww. And this is the first time that I feel safe. And it was just like, oh my God, how many people are out there that aren't sharing? So many.
That's right? So powerful, because I remember the first time I had shared my story was when I was working at the studio, and I had done an episode on my old podcast about my story. And I remember being in so much fear, number one, because I was an employee of the studio. And so I didn't know what the owners would think if they heard it. But number two, I was like, well, what if my mom hears it? What if my brother hears it? What if like X guy in the background hears it? Like this could potentially damage people, And I was in fear to release it. And then after I released it, of course, my mom ended up listening to it. And my mom called me kind of in tears, like, I I tried to be the best mom ever, blah, blah, which I felt that I portrayed in there. It was not like a hate thing towards my mom. It was like, these were the facts. This is what happened. I'm not holding a resentment, but it led up to some of these experiences. And I then later felt some guilt, experienced some guilt from some friends that were kind of like, well, I don't know if you should have really said that much. There's a lot of people that are offended by that stuff. And it just kind of reinstated to me that my voice didn't matter because I was too obscene, because my story was too bad for people to hear. So then it started developing in my mind that I was too damaged to be doing anything. And I shut down again for a while and was like, and I even took, certain things off of my website. I was writing a blog about some experiences, and I had changed names just to protect people in stories, but like I had put out some pretty crazy stuff on there, and people were like, I even had one woman I recorded a podcast with. She was a guest on my show, and for some reason she didn't do any diving into me before she was a guest on the show, and she found out later about the blog, and she actually requested I take the blog down because she felt that it didn't positively affect her audience, and since she was a guest on my show, it wouldn't look good, basically. And I did. I took the blog down, and I really just started silencing myself again. And I started carrying all that on the inside because I'm like, man, this is a sense of healing for me to speak about this, not only to be like, this is my story, but how many other women were reaching out to me saying, oh my God, me too. I don't want to use the hashtag me too, but like realistically, and like, this has helped me in my growth. Like, thank you for sharing. And so really, when I started this new podcast, that was another part of it. It was like, you know what, this is going to be unedited, unfiltered. We're just going to create a space for all the women to let out all their shit. And it doesn't have to be sexual abuse, but if it is, great, let's bring it on and let's freaking applaud this shit because we're strong, and others get to be like that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I hear those stories so often. And I love that you had enough awareness to say like, wow, I'm actually appeasing others because there's a piece of you, right? And whether it's there or not now, but there was a piece of you that said, I have to be liked by other people to be able to exist in this space. And really, again, like to your point earlier, it's not true, right? It means you need a new tribe.
Yeah, right.
It means the people that you're surrounding yourself with probably aren't the right people for where you are now. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. So I just want to reiterate to you that you are not too much. Your story is not too much. And everything that you've experienced and will continue to experience is perfect. And you're exactly where you need to be in order for your own healing and for you to continue to contribute to the world and the healing of others. Well, and it does not matter what anyone else thinks at all. Because if anything, let people think what they want to think and let those comments and those accusations fuel you, because often that is coming from their own fear and discomfort based on their inability to speak their truth.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. And what, I keep trying to go back to is, what is my intention, right? Like, if my intention is not to hurt others, always. If my intention is to help others, help grow myself, then why the fuck would I have to be quiet? And, somebody had brought up a point before. Well, what if a future, employer sees this and, you don't get a job? Number one, like you said, I'm not exactly a 9-to-5 kind of person. And number two, I guess it wasn't the job for me.
I was going to say, then go be a fucking entrepreneur.
Yeah, right. Which is this journey I am on. So, okay. God, Sheree, I feel like we could turn this into a 3-hour episode, but for the sake of our listeners today. Okay, so what are you doing now? You're doing ghostwriting, you're writing blogs, you're helping assist women through some of their careers. What's everything you got going on right now?
Yeah, so I specifically do ghostwriting. Again, everything that I do is books, and it's all transformational nonfiction. So that's, I call the woo-woo section of the bookstore. So ghostwriting, and then I do one-on-one book mentorship. So people that come to me and they want to write their book, but they need help doing it. I've got a lot of experience in it. So I take people through a 3-month journey, and by the end of the 3 months, their book is done. Nice. I am getting ready. At the time that we record this anyways, I'm getting ready to launch a group program, which will take a group of people through the process of writing their book together. So there's a lot of collaboration. And I'm not going to share the special surprise in there, but there's definitely something that's pretty unique about this program that I'm super stoked to share when it comes out. So
when is that coming out?
That is what I'm doing. April. We don't have a hard date yet, but the pre-launch will be April, and then we will begin in May.
Okay, so this podcast...
And that will be a 6-month container.
Awesome. Okay, so the podcast will be released in April, so I'll get that information from you once you have everything, and we'll put it in the description of the podcast as well.
Cool.
Yeah, so if people are interested in any of your services, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way, I mean, you can find information about kind of me and what I do on my website, which is just ShereeTrask.com. And social media is typically where I connect with people, Facebook or Instagram. It's just Sheree Trask. And then my email is Sheree@ShereeTrask.com.
Awesome. Cool. We'll list those in the description as well. So I did have another final question for you, though. If, I'm assuming a lot of our listeners are women right now, and maybe someone is listening and they're saying, damn, I'm stuck in this job, or I'm stuck in this relationship, or I'm stuck, just period, right? And I'm looking for some inspiration. I'm looking for something to move forward. I'm kind of waiting around for the right time to come or whatever. Like, what kind of advice would you have for someone?
First thing is move. You are not a fucking tree. The second thing is there will never be a right time. The right time is the moment you do it. And the third thing would be, if you have a calling in your heart or soul to do something different, stop questioning it, trust your intuition, and just act. We create confidence and courage through action. And the only way for us to gain those things is to take a leap of faith sometimes and say, you know what? There's a reason that I feel this, and I don't need to know why, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much. But why? Who cares?
Yeah, who cares? Who cares? And you will likely fall on your face 5,000 times. Embrace the fall. For everything that happens, just ask yourself, what did I learn?
Yes.
There's no judgment or shame to be had in the experiences that we experience. Like, again, it's choice, right? You have more power than you probably realize. Mm-hmm. And it's about harnessing that power by saying, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. One of my favorite mantras is, I can, I will, watch me. And I say that so often. It's like, anytime that I'm feeling scared about something, I can, I will, watch me. And always coming back to like the intention and the why behind why you do what you do.
Yeah.
Super important.
I love it. Thank you so much. And once again, your website is ShereeTrask.com, ShereeTrask.com. You also mentioned Instagram and Facebook, Sheree Trask. I'll list those in the description of the podcast as well. And for all of our listeners, don't forget to check out the podcast Patreon page at Limitless Ladies in Leadership to support the podcast and keep episodes coming. Don't forget to check out Sheree. And Sheree, I am so excited to see what you have to come. I know you've always got new things coming up, and I can't wait for this group book writing thing that you're starting. This sounds amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Danielle.
Yeah. And for everyone else, we will catch you next time.